think of a
101 damnation. That's what we're thinking.
That's right. It's like a chicken and egg question over whether the dog or the people were named first. Yeah, that's.
I'm sorry. It is true. You're absolutely right. Vincent got it a one there. So there might be some Dalmatian puns, as Patrick puts it. So 08085 909 693.
That would be Cruella de Vil, wouldn't it? Is that the right film?
I like what you're doing there. Yeah, it is Cruella.
That's right.
It is Cruella. The best character ever in a Walt Disney cartoon, in my view. So 08085 909 693 is the number to call if you'd like to join in the conversation for our World Football phone-in this morning. Any thoughts on Brazilian shirt names for Vincent, please text them to 85058, or you can email me Dotun, DOTUN, at bbc.co.uk. We're going to have a lot of fun this morning as we look back over the year that was 2020. Where should we start? In fact, can we start from the back and move forwards, Tim? Because the year ended with something of an international transatlantic row between Santos of Brazil and Barcelona of Spain. How on earth...
Catalonia.
Well, yeah, Catalonia, indeed. How on earth did we get into this row? Do you want to give us the background to it, please?
Yeah, well, first of all, if I, in the unlikely event that I outlast you, Cotton, I'm going to pay to have on your tombstone, here lies Dotun Adebayo, he preferred Cruella de Vil to Bambi. I think that should be your epitaph.
Who shot Bambi, though, is the question mark.
Yeah, maybe it was Cruella de Vil. She did have a cruel streak. What we talk about here in this it's not a row, animated discussion, difference of views, frank and cordial talks. I always like it when the talks are described as frank and cordial. It always reminds me of line readings for some reason. Is Lionel Messi overtaking Pelé in terms of competitive goals scored for one club. Messi last week, he reached a milestone of 644. Now that's one more competitive goals than Pelé scored for Santos between 1956 and 1974. What Santos are arguing with is that the friendlies should count as well, and he of a cluttered competitive calendar, and there were many more friendlies played, and some of the greatest games in the past were friendlies. Think of Hungary coming to Wembley and beating England 6-3. It's one of the most important games. It was a friendly, and lots of Pelé's friendlies were high-profile games against very good, strong opposition. So I can see that the point of view of Santos there, but on the other hand, friendly schmendly, it's a friendly. It's not the same as a competitive game. So while the fact that Messi has overtaken Pelé, it may seem as a kind of injustice to Pelé. I don't think it is really, especially because the greatness of great players doesn't lie in the statistics, does it? It's a silly row to argue about statistics with great players. Especially now we've got YouTube and so on, we can enjoy what they did. Let's enjoy it all. Let's congratulate Messi on reaching the milestone of 644, as Pelé did very graciously. He congratulated Messi. So let's all enjoy it both. At the end of the day, I don't think there's a row here.
Hang on, before you say that, let's ask listeners, should goals scored in so-called friendlies count? Let me know. Text me 85058.
They do count, but they count as goals scored in so-called friendlies. So you're putting them in a different category from goals scored in competitive games. I don't see anything wrong with that. That doesn't mean that the goals in friendlies are being forgotten. It just means that they're being placed in a different category. And Bobby Charlton's 49 for England, there's lots of friendly goals in there, but we don't discount them. We say he scored 49 goals for England. If you want to talk about who scored the most competitive goals for England, maybe someone else will have more. Rooney overtook Bobby Charlton anyway. But so we're not discounting those goals. We're just not counting them as competitive goals. It's on like a different shelf.
This charming van, Patrick, what do you think? Should they be on a different shelf, or should they be counted like any other goal? Is a friendly a competitive match or not for you?
Oh, that's a good one. I do think that friendlies are in a different category because also not every friendly is the same. You know, there are really competitive friendlies and the friendlies that really don't do anything. You know, so I do think it's very tricky to add friendlies.
Vincent, the thing that I wonder though is NOMA, because all it means much of the time is that it's not part of a recognised competition, but nobody wants to lose, even a friendly. Should they count to the same degree in terms of goals scored? Should they count to the same degree as a so-called competitive match? Are friendlies competitive or not?
What that means is, what he's actually saying here is that fantastic volley goal that he scored a couple of years back came in a friendly, and he wants it to be included in
yes,
the statistics.
You remember my goal. Look, I don't score many goals, but this one was a beauty. I ran. It was just on the five-a-side pitch, so I ran to the wire mesh dividing the pitch from the other pitches, and I did that sort of like camera thing that they do, but there was nobody there with a camera to capture it. So I have to tell the story over and over and over again. Basically, I leapt in the air, and it was only like 2 feet off the ground, but nevertheless, it was a volley, as Tim says. I just hit it with all my might, and what I remember was my shirt was full of wind at the back. You know, when you've used so much energy, it was like wind power partly there. Anyway, never mind. Is a friendly a competitive match or not for you?
I can sympathise with your goal. I can imagine. I remember once when I scored a goal, it was an equaliser, and I don't normally play up front, and I celebrated so hard that both teams were laughing. So I know how those feel.
Was anybody there to take the evidence? To snap a shot?
No, thankfully, no. This is before everyone was carrying iPhones in their pockets. So, but going back to your friendly thing, it's chalk and cheese. You can't compare the era of friendlies back when Pelé played. It's an unfair comparison, and like was mentioned, statistics are statistics. And for example, if Barcelona played Real Madrid today and it was a friendly, how friendly do you think that would be?
Yeah.
I mean,
not very friendly.
And the difference is today, wherever there's a free spot, and because of commercialism and how much football's grown, there's more. Everything's filled up. There's not much room for friendlies. They're pretty much just a season warmers where you test new team formations and new players. But back in those days, when Pelé played, those friendlies were probably their starting lineups. And they're probably more competitive than just say what we refer to friendlies today as.
Yeah, you say that, but then Dan in Manchester sends me a text and saying, if you're using that argument, Vincent, he thinks that pre-VAR or VAR goals are an issue. Do you see what I mean? That if Messi's goal
opens up all of them.
Well, yeah. If you're comparing periods, then you look at the restraints that other time periods had compared to now. As Tim often points out, in those days, you had defenders chopping at your legs as a striker and no referee to protect you. So it was arguably harder for somebody like Pelé to score goals in those days without the protection that somebody like Messi would have. So it's difficult comparing times to time.
It's a tricky one to compare. It's like, I don't know, just say you look at cars, you're comparing the latest Ferrari to the one in Hamilton. You just can't compare them. They're different. It was a different sport, and I think it's similar with football. You can't. It's not fair on Pelé or Messi to compare them in that way. In fact, I'm getting upset listening to this.
Well, Rari's always a Rari, surely, Tim. Do you know what I mean?
No.
He's talking about a Rari from back in the day versus one of today. A Rari is always a Rari. Come on.
Different to drive. Different, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the badge and the... There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, 08085 909 693. There's lots to talk about today. Let's talk about the year that's been. It started, I suppose, quite well, football-wise, Tim, but then in March, lockdown.
Yeah, well, the repercussions of this are going to be rolling on for some time, aren't they? I worry about clubs lower down the pyramid going out of business. I worry about the amount of strain which is being put on players with the fixed pile-up and the amount of games that are being squeezed into tight states. I mean, quite a few of the South American countries, they've had to kind of improvise, and some just decided they're not going to improvise championships. They're going to stick the original format of the championship and only end it at the end of February. And others have decided, no, we're going to squeeze everything into this year. And Bolivia, for example, they've still got 2 rounds to play this year. They got one on the. No, so it's the last 2 rounds with the league title at stake, just 48 hours apart, and there's a price that's going to be paid for this in terms of injury and burnout and so on. So worrying times indeed. The highlight for me though was kind of forced by COVID, and it was that bubble in the middle of the year, or just after the middle of the year, with the final of the final stages of the Champions League. I thought that was sensational. I thought it was that little bubble thing that we had. It was like a World Cup, only with club sides. And these days, the best club sides, the best European club sides, are better than the national teams in the World Cup. For 2 reasons. One, because they train together all the time, so they've got that togetherness, and also because they've cherry-picked the best players from the far-flung corners of the world and got them together into one team. So that kind of bubble, I regained my enthusiasm for football during that, because when it all shut down, you're thinking about other things and so on. And when it came back in that bubble, the quality of games was so great. I fell in love with it all over again. So that for me was a surprise highlight, one forced on us by COVID. I suspect that it was so successful that UEFA will do it again in future years, even without COVID, because that condensed feeling of having a World Cup with the greatest club sides, I thought, for me, I don't know what our friends think about this, but for me, I thought that worked wonderfully well.
Well, let's talk about our friends. We'll come to Sir Edmondo Hillary in a moment, and John has gone for upstart Croatian, if you see what I mean. And Tito Iwi, I like that actually, because not many people think of Marshal Tito as a Croatian. And there was one more I thought you might like. I'll have to come back to it in a moment or two. Let's start with Patrick first of all. Is Tim Bright, was that bubble tournament one of the highlights for you as well?
Yeah, I would say so. It was, it was indeed a really unique. It was a very unique kind of last-minute pulled-together tournament, which no one really truly expected anymore. In March. And so when that suddenly happened, it wasn't just that it had a real World Cup feeling, but I also thought there was a real enthusiasm and a real energy within the teams, because everyone was so happy to be on that pitch again and to be playing again. And I thought and it all bonded us. It all brought us together, even though there was no one in the actual stadiums. But I thought it was a very unique. It was a very unique. It was a very unique way to finish that tournament. And I also think you will never regain that same. You will never regain that same feeling again. I thought it was truly unique, and that was the same for the Premier League. I also thought that ended in a really elegant way. So yeah, very, very happy about that time.
Yeah, before I go to Ivan Hakatic in a moment or two, just whilst that tournament, scientists were trying to solve the problem of how
in the world, but we need to get rid of the costly, pointless regulations. There are so many examples of it where we have to jump through hoops before we can do any business.
That was Simon Boyd, who's Managing Director of the manufacturer Reed Steel, talking to my colleague Marie Keyworth. We're going to be back in just a few minutes, so don't go away. You're listening to Business Matters with me, Jamie Robertson, my two guests, Nisha Copeland, who is in Hong Kong, and Nicole Chalmers, who's in LA. See you in a minute.
This is the BBC World Service, looking at climate change.
The climate study endorsed by 11,000 scientists warns there'll be untold human suffering.
The message is stark.
These aren't anyone's opinions or political views. This is the current best available science.
Climate change is affecting people across the world.
In Phoenix, it is hot all the time, during the day and during the night. This heat is not normal.
Port of Bangladesh has been affected by the floods. We have more than 15,000 people displaced.
We've got fires that are still burning, transforming landscapes, wiping out wildlife.
So how do we face these challenges?
Each week we'll talk to our journalists on the ground and hear how the crisis is unfolding right in front of their eyes.
And we'll bring together leading experts to hear how we might make a better future.
Join Neil Rozelle and Greer Jackson for The Climate Question at bbcworldservice.com.
You're listening to Business Matters from the BBC World Service with me, Jamie Robertson. Coming up in the next half hour, China's regulators bring the massive Alibaba to heel. We'll look at the reasons why Jack Ma's tech giant is making China uncomfortable. And a year of memories in pictures, lockdowns, nurses, doctors, oil minus $30 a barrel, cleaner air. What do you remember about 2020?
BBC News with Debbie Russ. The US President-elect Joe Biden says his transition team has faced what he called irresponsible obstruction from the political leadership of the Department of Defense. He said his transition team was not getting enough information on key national security areas, an allegation rejected by the acting Defense Secretary, Christopher Miller. The US House of Representatives has voted to override President Trump's veto of a
В тексте случается одна или две опечатки, вы все равно можете понять, что это тот же самый текст. Точно так же наша иммунная система не глупее.
85. And now Senator Marco Rubio calling out Fauci with this tweet. Dr. Fauci lied about masks in March. Dr. Fauci has been distorting the levels of vaccination needed for herd immunity. It isn't just him. Many in elite bubbles believe the American public doesn't know what's good for them, so they need to be tricked into doing the right thing. Interesting. So let's go to you, Marie. Many Americans have become incredibly frustrated with the changing stories from Dr. Fauci. What say you about Senator Marco Rubio's tweet? Do you believe it? Do they think it was too tough?
Well, if Marco Rubio doesn't trust Dr. Fauci, then maybe he shouldn't have gotten vaccinated like he did before healthcare workers and elderly people. If he was so dubious about the science, then maybe he shouldn't have taken a place at the front of the line to get vaccinated. But the bigger point is one that Dr. Fauci made in that clip that you played. This is a new disease. This is a new virus. We didn't even know about it a year ago. And a brand new vaccine that we are just seeing the first results from. So throughout this pandemic, I think people need to realize that as we learn more, the doctors will tell you what they learn. And as we get new information, they will be upfront with you. And they should be encouraged by lawmakers and people in positions of power to understand that process. A year ago, we had never even heard of COVID-19, and now we know so much more about it. And so that's what Dr. Fauci was talking about. Bottom line is, Sean, everyone should get the vaccine when they're able to. The more people that get it, the more of us are protected.
And listen, Maria, I think that point is well made. But to you, Lisa, if you look at some of the things that Dr. Fauci has talked about, and he got wrong, he was opposed to closing flights to China. He was opposed to lockdowns. He was in favor of school shutdowns. He was in favor of masks, then opposed to masks. And now he got the herd immunity information wrong. So should we be listening to Dr. Fauci and anything he says?
Well, Andy was wrong about the fatality rate as well. He said that it was going to be, I think, something like 1%. Obviously, it's closer to the flu, or depending on the age group. But so he has been consistently wrong. I think the left picks the wrong heroes. I mean, they really heralded Dr. Fauci despite the fact that he has been consistently wrong about just about everything. And it's not just the data and the changing data. A lot of this information has been there. He just got it wrong. And then further, he has spoken so definitively without any caveats, without any hedging, just so definitively. And his words have consequences, because what we have seen is now we have an economic crisis as a result of some of the decisions that people were made, in part because of the information that he was putting out and the rhetoric he was putting out. We have an education crisis where so many children have fallen behind in schools as well. So we have all of these issues as a result of the decisions that public health officials have made, like Dr. Fauci. So that's my problem, is that he has spoken so definitively when he actually didn't have the information, or the information didn't really back up what he was saying. And it's caused a lot of pain for a lot of Americans.
Good point. Tyrus, I want to talk to you about your beard. I can't, though. We don't have time. What I want to ask you, though, is a lot of Americans are unwilling to take the vaccine, right? There's more and more people who are skeptical about taking vaccines. And if you look at some of our public health officials and some of the misstatements they've made and missteps they've made through the coronavirus pandemic, is that one of the reasons why they don't trust the vaccine?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons, but before we begin that, just so you know, my beard game is strong. You know what I'm saying? That's just the way it works out, symmetrically intact. I think here's the biggest problem. I think we just need to relax a little bit as far as, you know, calling scientists liars, because it's something new. We're going to see a lot of changes. We're going to see a lot what we knew in the beginning, we don't know at the end. The problem is when we start politicizing medicine, we end up in situations like this. It's not so much that Dr. Fauci had information, it's just that he decided to change it a little bit so it'd be easier to swallow, saying, oh, we only need 75 if we're getting 50% of the population taking the vaccine. But then he found out it might be 60. So once you start tweaking things like that, you open yourself up to criticism, whereas science, it should just be the hypothesis, which is, you know, and as things go until they are facts. And that's the problem. Once you start playing, well, I can only tell them this because I don't think they can handle it, you're no longer being in science, you're now being political. And I think that's a fine line. And during this climate, it's really hard for guys to watch where, you know, just give us the facts. That's why I encourage everyone, be your own investigative reporter, read everything, go to the sites, educate yourself, because you never know what side of the fence they might be trying to lean or what TV station they are in terms of giving information. So, you know, it's just unfortunate that we're not sticking to science and we're starting to get into personal opinions.
It's called freedom. Make decisions for yourself. Emily, I want to quickly go to you because you're a West Coast girl, and we've seen some of the strictest lockdowns in California. At the same time, we see surging COVID cases in California. Is this the case study that shows that lockdowns don't actually impact the spread of COVID?
Yes, in part. I think the science reflected that to begin with, when in the initial studies we saw that there weren't discernible evidence delineating between outdoor and indoor dining. That's one. I think it's a bigger reflection of the incompetence that has plagued California for decades. And as a lifelong Californian, it breaks my heart to see, for some reason, the skyrocketing statistics that match each other. That for some reason, that's the pattern. When you throw a bunch of money at something, it makes the problem worse because it's not backed by a targeted, reasonable reason, right? So we've seen that with homelessness, we've seen that with lockdowns, we've seen that with pensions and budgets and bankruptcy in that state. But unfortunately, you know, to Lisa's point, of course, a hammer will see every problem as a nail. So everything Dr. Fauci says, of course, will be with a biology and science in his view. But it's the local leaders, it's the elected officials that failed to take into account all of the other ramifications, the economics, the starvation of livelihoods that occurred when they were making these decisions. So for me, the blame lies squarely with them.
Well, that's right. California lockdowns break my heart, too, as well, Emily. But we have to move on. So ahead, more unbelievable anti-Trump bias from CNN. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany now firing back at one of their top.
Let's go for Croatian Kiwi for tonight. But when we're talking rugby, when we go to the odd discipline of that ball shape and everything like that, we will say you are a Kiwi Croatian. Do it the other way around for that. But for tonight, he's our Croatian Kiwi. Oh, and thank you. Here is another permutation of the issue of Messi and Pele's goals. What about this one, guys? Hamish in Glasgow is the one that's thrown this into the mix. Oh, by the way, he says Loda Balkans is your Brazilian shirt name, is the one that he wants to go for. He says he doesn't want to complicate the Messi-Pele debate, but he agrees that goals scored in friendlies shouldn't be counted, but neither, here comes a controversy, should goals scored from penalties. He feels that only goals scored in open play should be counted. Well, you have to count records. Does he have a point? Tim, I'm going to come to you last. Let's start with this charming Van. Does he have a point there, Hamish? Because, you know, goals scored from a penalty is like, it's not as profound maybe as goals scored from open play.
But I think that's really taking it too far because if you go down that route, is then a really nice chipped penalty? Is that a lesser goal than if you're standing on the goal line and you basically get the ball handled on the plate? Is that a truly lesser goal? I really don't think so. I think penalties are definitely goals that should be counted, because really, I mean, if you get a penalty in the 89th minute, I mean, I don't think there's anything that has a bigger pressure on it than at that point in the game. So no, absolutely, I think those need to be counted.
Yeah, Vincent, or Super Overmars, as one of our listeners wants to call you. What do you think?
I think penalties are goals regardless. I know because you also have to look at, if you're going to open that can of worms, you have to look at how was that penalty game. Was it like a one-on-one with the keeper and that striker was cut down and then he got the opportunity to take that penalty? And also when you look at another little topic with Messi, like if you remember when Neymar was in the team and Neymar was in a bit of a drought, he used to give his penalties to Neymar to get his confidence up. So I don't think Messi's aim was just to get goals. It was to get. And I go back to saying the comparison is unfair because of the errors. If you're gonna add goals, penalties are goals in the story.
Yeah, Tim, are they the same? Do they have the same weight in terms of the spectacle, penalties, compared to goals scored from open play?
Some great points made. I've stood on both sides of this debate over time, because sometimes it seems absurd that, especially if the player who takes the penalty has had nothing to do with gaining the penalty, and he gets the credit, and sometimes that has seemed a little bit absurd to me. And then I've thought, well, you go and take it, you go and deal with pressure, and some of it is proof of Einstein's theory of relativity, isn't it? If you're the goalkeeper, the goal looks enormous, and if you're the fella taking the penalty, the goal looks absolutely tiny. And some of the greatest dead ball strikers in the history of the game didn't want to take penalties. Rivellino, the Brazilian Rivellino, fantastic taker of free kicks, didn't want to take penalties. It was all too much pressure for him. So it's a huge pressure situation. So I think the compromise solution that I've come up with in the end is a goal's a goal and a penalty is a goal. But if there's two players level on the same number of goals, the one with fewer penalties for me wins. A kind of away goals rule.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's a nice way of looking at it. And I do know about the pressure. I was privileged enough to take penalties. I think I took 3 penalties against Shane Given. I didn't get anywhere near him. I use all my might. I use everything, every ounce of power that I had in one of them. And he more or less had his arms folded. Anyway, that's another story.
It's a good discussion, I think, on because in like World Cups, knockout tournaments, and so on, the whole thing can be decided by penalties. So, can you train them? Can they be trained? I remember when England lost to Argentina in the Ken Hoddle, who was England coach, he said, no, you can't train them. You can't train the pressure that there will be at that moment. Anything you do on the training ground is not comparable. I have to say, I don't thoroughly agree. Obviously, there's something in that. But if you go down that route, you might as well. There's no point in training anything, because it's not the same as a game. And the masters of it are Germans. And I saw Jurgen Klinsmann once explain to an audience of Brazilian coaches how he did it, and it was to get them bets. The ones who miss the penalties have to buy dinner for everyone else. They don't want to do that. So you find ways to apply artificial pressure on training to do as best as you can to replicate the pressure of the match situation. And it is such a tough one, because adrenaline kicks in, and the best place to put the penalty, the best place to put it, the place that no goalkeeper in the world will ever stop penalty is if it's in the top corner. You can't get there. You can't do it. You can't get there. On the other hand, no one has ever missed a penalty for hitting it too low. And the adrenaline kicking in, you're going for the top corner, you just get that calculation a little bit wrong, and you hit the bar on it, and it's going over. So it's the old relationship between risk and reward. So I'm in favour of Klinsmann's approach.
It is a proper gamble, isn't it? Yeah.
It is a gamble, but do something in training, artificially of course, but do something in training to try and reproduce the pressure that the players are going to be under in game situations.
Okay, let's bring on a caller, 08085 909 693. We've got Carl in Spain with us. Hello, Carl.
Hi there, Doctor. Hi there, Tim, as well. And please send my regards to the gent at fellow Pole.
I will do.
Oh,
Indeed. Yeah. I'm sure he's listening as we speak in any case. So, but thanks. Appreciate the call. Dzień dobry, by the way. Appreciate the call.
Dobry wieczór. No, this time of night you say dobry wieczór.
Oh, dobry wieczór. Okay. Well, I was only going to say jak się masz.
Dobrze, dziękuję.
Okay, dobry.
Dobrze, dziękuję. I like dobrze, dziękuję. What's it mean?
Dobrze, dziękuję. Fine, thank you.
Yeah, Tim is that kind of a guy. I'm sorry, Carl. It was supposed to be a conversation. Hey, what are you doing in Spain?
I live in Barcelona with my family.
Oh, wow. Good for you.
So jealous.
Yeah, me too. Envious all the way.
We come and stay.
Yeah, I've been here for sort of like 25 years.
And you avoided Tim's question as to whether we can all come and stay.
Yeah, he did that one very well.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Open house.
You never know. Anyway, great to have you with us. Really appreciate the call. What do you think of this Messi-Pele debate, out of interest?
Quite frankly, I'll just put one point forward, first of all. Messi has played far fewer games than Pele, far more games, than Pele did for his club. Pele played far fewer games and scored more goals in that period. So therefore, end of debate. There's no comparison. If you played more games, you've got more opportunities to play, to make goals.
Tim was suggesting they'll throw you out of Barcelona for saying that. But having said that, Messi, is he persona non grata to a certain extent, wanting to leave Barcelona now in the city?
As a Real Madrid supporter, I don't give a damn. Quite frankly, no. I mean, I think he's behaved absolutely absurdly with his club. I don't know if you know the latest news, which is being played on the radio here, etc. Messi has sort of said, I want to play in the USA. And then when I finish there, I want to come back and have a position in Barca. How more arrogant can you get than that?
Well, Tim, have you heard that? Did you know that? I know. I know you was going to throw a party that you wanted to talk about.
No, that's Neymar. Neymar is not
Neymar's
Messi.
an imbecile.
That's harsh. A little bit harsh, Carl. Anyway,
have you heard about Neymar?
Yes.
No, that he's having a continuous party in Brazil at the moment.
This is what Tim was going to talk about. Yeah, that's just.
It's a New Year's Eve party. His people, his staff, are denying that it's happening. Neymar isn't denying it's happening. This is New Year's Eve, and there was talk of 500 people invited, and there are 150. Until it actually happens, I'm going to lay off calling him what Carl called him. If it does go ahead, it's a serious breach, because I mean the corona thing is out of control here as well. He seemed to have made progress this year, and if he does this, it's like he's living in a parallel world. Hopefully, and clearly his people know that this is a public relations disaster. Hopefully, it won't go ahead. With Messi, he floated the idea of perhaps, maybe in the future, playing in the United States, or actually living in the United States. Not even necessarily playing, because one thing that clearly attracts him, and I remember talking on the show to Juan Pablo Angel, the former Aston Villa striker, who said that he was really enjoying life in the United States because you don't get recognised all the time. It was great. He could wander places. And Messi said in this interview how dull his life is. No, he would love to go to the supermarket or go to the cinema or go to a restaurant. And everything he does, he's got these 300 pairs of eyes on him all the time. And maybe the idea of the United States, not necessarily as a player, but living there briefly, it would be the hope that he could pass anonymously. I fear that he's in a bracket of fame where that's not really possible. I don't necessarily think it's arrogance on his part.
There, please?
Yeah, Carl.
Go on, Carl.
I live in Barcelona, okay? I can promise you that Messi is just as wanders around and nobody interferes with him. He doesn't have paparazzi everywhere, and he goes to a restaurant or wherever he does. You can do that just like a normal person. I can guarantee you that.
How come? How come he can do that in Barcelona, where he's treated and revered like a god? How come?
Because people here are totally different to the UK. You do have the stupid papers like Deporte Mundo, El Sport, and all these. Okay, they go on about football, they invent stories. They're sort of like the Sun on sport. But basically, people let people get on with their life here. It's totally different to what happens in the UK, where you see stories coming out every single day. Even when Ronaldinho was here, it took until he got really, really bad that it became public knowledge that he was pissed out of his brain, excuse me, sorry for saying that, on the car bonnet outside some nightclub.
It's an American word,
It was the end of his career in Barcelona before that came here.
Yeah. Okay, and Carl, you had a question that you wanted to pose, or at least a statement that you wanted to talk about.
Are you talking about the Poland thing? No, well, what I was trying to point out, that when you talk about players like Messi and Rooney, who've broken records, etc., first of all, they've broken records with far more games than the people who held the record before them. Rooney, i.e. England. But also, they're playing at a time when they're overly protected. I mean, they didn't have to play like Pele did with players like, when there was Chopper Harris, Bite Your Legs, Norman Hansen, and all these. They were playing in a different time where they didn't have the time on the ball and they weren't protected as much as the referees protect them now. So I think you also have to take that into consideration.
So are you not as impressed by Wayne Rooney surpassing Bobby Charlton's record as an England goal scorer?
No way. No? Absolutely no way. First, because Bobby Charlton played far fewer games.
Yeah, but the record isn't about the number of games, isn't it? It's not about your average.
No. I disagree. If you've scored 50 goals in 50 games, and somebody scores 60 goals in 100 games, who's got the better record?
Well, if you've scored 100 goals in 1,000 games, and the person below you scored 99 goals in 99 games, you still got the record. It doesn't, because this isn't cricket,
no,
is it?
I don't think
it's
you can work records that way. You have to look at it. I would put it another way, Dotton. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay. That's okay.
Percentage of goals over all your games. In which case, Bobby Charlton has the record.
Yeah, okay. Let's ask our guest here as well. Vincent, first of all, would you say that? Because, you know, you're a cricket man as much as anything, I imagine, as well. In cricket, the average is really important, is it? But in football, is it as important, or is it the number of goals you score rather than the goals per game?
Oh, you have to go goals per game. So if a striker's scoring one goal every 90 minutes versus 180, it's obvious that one is more valuable than the other, right?
Yep. Okay, fair enough. So you back Carl on that. How about you, this charming Van? Where would you go?
Well, I would definitely go the other way because I also think you also then need to look. You also then need to put it in the perspective of time that a player like Messi now is under so much more pressure than the players were in the 1960s and 1970s. Just the amount of pressure and the amount of attention and the constant flow of games, and to then keep on scoring goals in the fashion that someone like Messi does, I think is in a whole different ballpark than and Pelé was amazing. He was great. But Messi, I think, given the circumstance in which he's done it, I think that definitely counterbalances, having done it over more games rather than the goal ratio per game.
I think the goal ratio, Tim, if you're centre forward and people look at your goal ratio, then it starts becoming important. But overall, in terms of, you said earlier on about winning games, it's about winning games, isn't it? Winning for the team. So does it matter if your goal ratio isn't as impressive as somebody else, as long as you're scoring goals? Does it matter? Is it important?
Well, I think that the great players are not judged on these kind of stats anyway. They're judged on what they do in the big games. But I think what we're talking here about two different records. I mean, there's value in both of them, isn't there? There's value in accumulation, in scoring more than anyone else, and there's certainly value in scoring them quicker than anyone else. They're two different. In a way, we're back to the George Best debate. George Best was absolutely fantastic, but for maybe 7 years, and you can find players, Pelé, Maradona,
Can
Messi,
I just say something
Ronaldo.
here?
Yeah.
Can I say something here?
Carl, I'm looking at the time. I wanted you to tell us who Lubanski was and why you want to compare him to Lewandowski.
Only if you let me just make one quick comment on George Best. I'm a Leeds United supporter. I saw George Best in his prime. And I will say this. George Best played on the pitch by himself. Leo Messi had Iniesta, Xavi and all that. If you look how his form has fallen over the last couple of years, it's because he doesn't have
George
those players
Best
behind
had
him.
Dennis Law, had Bobby Charlton, had Brian Kidd.
But George Best really played by himself. I was at a semi-final in the FA Cup at Birmingham, and I'll never forget how. He was a really true class player. Although I disliked him as a Man United player, and I was a Leeds United.
No, but it doesn't matter about that.
What you want me
He
to
had
say?
Nobby Styles.
Lubanski. You're talking about Lubanski, okay?
Yeah.
The gent always